I learned a long, long time ago that there are certain things that have to happen in my life if I want to connect deeply with God in this world, and I do. For me, my Christianity is not about a church service. I want everything he's offering, and he offered life beyond what we could ever experience without him. I want that. So I learned a long time ago there are 4 things that have to be present in my life from Jesus in order for me to really experience him like I'm capable of. The number one thing, according to Jesus, is that one. That's number one. You have to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That was our topic last week. If you missed it, go online at our website. You can watch the whole thing. I highly encourage you. If you're watching online and you didn't watch that one, hit pause on this one, go watch that one. So, because it's the foundational one according to Jesus. He said this is the first priority, is that you love him. Because when you love him, then everything else goes in order. But then Jesus said, and then, by the way, love your neighbor as yourself, and everybody's your neighbor, so loving people is the second part of that, and there's so much to this, like loving even your enemies, according to Jesus. Not tolerating your enemies, loving your enemies. So there's a big challenge here. So we love God, we love people, and then he said the third thing you have to learn how to do is really make yourself a servant in this world, so you start serving. And then the fourth thing is you got to talk about Jesus to other people. And if you do that, that'll keep your faith strong. So these are like the 4 foundational things that you need to have in your life if you want your spiritual life to really connect with God. You want joy in your spiritual life? You want joy? I want joy. Do you want meaning? You want purpose? It's found in the pursuit of these things. Let me give you an example of it. There was a young woman I read about named Mela Chambers. Mela was born, she was the 5th and final child in an extremely unsafe home. Matter of fact, when she was just an infant, the government stepped in and took all the kids away from this mom and dad. Drug use, violence, all kinds of stuff going on. So as an infant, she was put in the foster care system with her siblings, and it was just one bad foster experience after another. So when she became a teenager, she was in so much pain from all the rejection she was experiencing that she started cutting. You know about cutting, right? I've always wondered what in the world that was about, but she explained it perfectly. She said, when I would cut myself, the physical pain hurt less than all the emotional pain. So it was like it made me feel better to cut. Isn't that incredible? That's how much emotional pain people are in when they start cutting. They'd rather have the pain of that bleeding arm than all this pain inside of them that they don't know what to do with. And so she's just struggled. At the age of 18, of course, you know what happens? She ages out of the foster care system and she's homeless. And then she starts losing her sight. She has a degenerative eye condition that's causing her blindness at the age of 18. You're homeless, you've had that upbringing, and now you're going blind. How many of you think that you would be just loving God at that point in your life? Interestingly, for her, and grateful for her, she was in an area where there was a church nearby that really took God's command to serve seriously. They heard about her situation, saw her homeless, and they started reaching out. First with just food, and then temporary shelter, and then one of the women of the church just fell in love with this young girl and took her into her home. So now she had a home, and she had a church. And she said as she started being served over and over and over again by these Christians, she said, I learned one day that there is a distinct difference between knowing about Jesus and actually knowing Jesus. Do you know that distinction? Do you know what that means? Some of you know about Jesus. You can pass the trivia. It's meaningless. Not till you know Jesus does it change your life. And she was so overwhelmed by this discovery, her life began to change immediately. She said, I felt like God was saying to me, you are valuable to me, and you are valuable to my kingdom. And so she began to look for opportunities to serve everywhere she could. She began to view everything as a missions opportunity. She went on a missions trip with her church to Cuba. Then she volunteered to be a counselor at a children's camp in West Virginia. Now, the only way she could do it as blind is she went early and she had someone walk it over and over and over again until she could walk all the paths without her walking stick. So that way the kids wouldn't feel uncomfortable. She didn't want the kids to feel uncomfortable. Then she served as a counselor for middle school girls at a summer camp, and then she started teaching middle school girls Sunday school classes at her church. She also served at a homeless shelter, and everywhere she went, she told people about this wonderful Jesus that they could not know about, but know. She even reached out to her estranged father so she could tell him about the love of God. She said this, "The Lord has given this blindness to me as a gift." How many of you could ever picture those words coming out of your mouth? The Lord has given this blindness to me as a gift. And I want to do whatever he's calling me to do with it. I really love serving. I love missions. I want others to hear the good news of what Jesus has done. He's given me this life, and he is living it through me. How many of you, if you went through a fraction of what she had endured to that point in your life, would describe your life as with things like joy and meaning and purpose? How many of you think that those would be the qualities that you would be talking about? I mean, most Christians I know who fall away from their faith endure far less than what she has, and yet here she is living with this tremendous, overwhelming joy and mission and purpose. And that's what I want you to know, that when you get serious about adding these elements into your life, that the outcome is joy. If you want joy, you got to do this. If you want meaning, you got to do this. You want purpose, you got to do this. We're going to focus only on one of them today. We're in this series called Refocus, and it's about getting our attention back on what really matters in this world. And we're going to just talk about this. What do you do when your life feels like it's missing purpose or missing joy? So I want to ask you to open your program. Inside, you'll find these notes. Would you take your notes out, grab a pen? There should be a pen. If not, there are pens back there. You're welcome to grab a pen and fill this in as we go through this today. Of course, welcome to those who are watching online. Heard this last week about someone watching out on the West Coast. Great to have you watching. If you go to our website at pennychurchlife.com, you can download these notes for free. So here's the only thing I really want to talk about. It's really about that serving focus. And really what we're talking about doing is investing in the lives of others by serving. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to invest in the lives of others by serving. So let me be really, really honest with you. I was really slow to understand what I'm about to talk to you about. I became a follower of Jesus at the age of 14. And I read my Bible through 3 times before I graduated from high school. So I read over and over again what Jesus said and what he did, and I still didn't get it. As a matter of fact, I became a pastor. I pastored for 26 years before in 2006, I was attending this leadership conference. Every year I'd go to it. I loved it. I mean, leadership thing is like, love it. I used to go every year, and then all of a sudden I started getting friends to come with me. Come with me, you got to come to this. It was like a 2.5-day conference. Come with me, and it was so much fun. I loved it. Every year they had these great speakers. I learned so much. And in 2006, I had this big group of people coming. They announced who was going to be speaking, and one of their speakers that year was going to be Bono, the lead singer of U2. And they were going to be doing this interview with Bono, talk about AIDS in Africa. And I got to tell you, my attitude stunk. I had a really bad attitude. You want some honesty? This will not make you think nice thoughts about me a long time ago, okay? But this is honest, okay? I was like, what do I care? First off, I don't like his music, so that's a problem. But second, what do I care if some multi-zillionaire is going to tell me about how I should be giving more to AIDS in Africa? Why don't you sell one of your 57 private jets, huh? Your 29 houses. I don't care what you have to say to me. Put your money where your mouth is. So I had a little bit of a bad attitude. Okay, I'm being really honest, in case you're not catching that, right? I had a bad attitude. And so I had all these friends coming with me to this leadership conference in this place, and so we were there, and I knew this session was coming up, and the place we were at had a bookstore, and I was going to fake a coughing fit and just go read in the bookstore, so I don't have to listen to some zillionaire tell me how I should be giving more to AIDS issues in Africa, right? So I had a little bad attitude. Needless to say, the interview started, and I never left. I never left. I was stunned by what I heard. I was stunned. At the time, there were 15 million children under the age of 18 who had been orphaned by HIV and AIDS. 15 million, and they were expecting that it was going to rise to 18 million by 2010. 18 million, the numbers are incomprehensible. I was I love to read about World War II history. I love it. These numbers are way beyond the number of people slaughtered by the Nazis in the Holocaust. It was literally living through a modern day Holocaust. And you know how much I'd cared about it to that moment? Nothing. And I often wondered, how would we stand up during the Holocaust? We were Christians back then. And here was a Holocaust 10 times worse, and I hadn't said a thing. And why didn't the fact that his parents were dead at the age of 5, why didn't that bother me? And then there are tens of millions, 18 million. Why didn't that bother me? I was so convicted, so overwhelmed by it. And I knew that I had to change. And so I didn't know what to do, but it really began. Bono, I still don't like his music, but Bono changed my life. And part of what hurts so bad is that I should have known better. Have you ever, if you read your Bible at all, if you're just beginning, maybe you're just beginning, it's like, I don't know where to start. Just read the first 4 books of the second part of your Bible called the New Testament. It's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And if you just read a chapter a day out of those books, you will focus on Jesus every single day. I highly encourage you. You want one spiritual habit for the rest of the year? Do this. Every day, read one chapter out of Matthew, and just go through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and when you're done, start over, and you will just focus on Jesus and focus on Jesus, and what you will see is what I knew as Bono was listening to me, preaching to me, and it's like, oh my goodness. If you read it all about the life of Jesus, you will see that all he does, so much of what he does on earth is just serve. That's what he does. He serves people's physical needs. He heals the blind. He heals the lepers. He heals the lame. He meets people's financial or physical needs by providing food for them. On more than one occasion, he does it just like serve and serve and serve and serve. Here's one example. Matthew 9:36, Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them. And what does he do? The last 3 words, he heals the sick. He's like, I have to get involved. I have to do something. This is Jesus. He was a servant among us, and stunningly so, because what we believe and what the Bible teaches is that he wasn't just a person, not just a good teacher, but that he was God who'd come to live among us. And instead of taking the rightful spot he should have got on earth with all of us bowing before him, he bowed before us. So he could put a serving towel on and serve us. It's just incredibly opposite of what should have been. And he served and served and served. And he didn't just serve people's physical needs, he also served their emotional needs. One of my favorite stories in the Bible, I go back to it again and again, is a story many of you know called the story of the woman at the well. In Israel was this long country, and the middle part was this part called Samaria, and the Samaritans lived there, and they had a little bit of different way in which they worshiped God. And the difference is offended the Jews, and the Jews hated the Samaritans, hated them. I mean, they hated them. So Samaritans were outcast. They were unwanted, unwelcomed, and this woman was unwanted and unwelcomed even among the Samaritans. She had been married and divorced 5 times, which was scandalous in that time period. And now she was just living with another guy. She was, rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection. She was unwanted in this world and used. And Jesus Christ intentionally went out of his way to be at the well at the very moment he knew she was going to be coming. And he sent his disciples into town to buy food so he could have a conversation with her to tell her that even when the world rejects you, the God of the universe is just dying to have you because you are never unloved by him. And he wants to pour living water into you and transform your life. This is our God. Endless serving, endless meeting of physical needs and emotional needs. And then in one of the famous stories in the Bible, many of you know this story too. He tells the story because somebody says, well, who's my neighbor? Because he says, love your neighbor. And somebody says, well, who's my neighbor? And he says, do you want to know who your neighbor is? And he tells this story. And he says, there's a guy who was a Jew. He was traveling for business, and he was robbed and left for dead beside the side of the road. And a Samaritan comes along. Again, one of the hated Samaritans. And where Jews had walked by and done nothing, his own people, the Samaritan is the one who stops. And the Samaritan one who treats his wounds, puts him on his donkey, takes him to an inn, pays the innkeeper all the expenses to care for the man until he's back up on his feet. And then he asks the guy, which one of them loved his neighbor? And everyone's like, well, obviously that guy. And then Jesus finishes with one of the simplest, most profound commands in the entire Bible. Look at this. Jesus told him, here's what I want you to do. Go and do likewise. Now, is this command unclear? Is there any, it's like, well, I'm not sure what he wants, right? Well, what did Jesus want us to do? Jesus said, I want you to go and listen. In America, we've reduced Christianity to go and listen once in a while, right? Sit and soak. Go and judge. Christians do that a lot. What did he command us to do? It's not hard to understand. One thing, go and do. You will never, ever, ever know the true power of Christianity until you start living that out. You want joy, you want meaning, you want purpose, that's it. It's found here. Because you won't know his power until you start going and doing. Because what do you need his power for? Oh God, make sure the batteries in my remote control don't go out so I can't watch my show right now. It's like, what do you need his power for? Until you are going and doing, you won't know his power. This is one of the things that broke my heart about COVID. For all that time, what happened was COVID shut down worship service, but it shut down serving. And all of a sudden, everybody got into a new habit of online shopping and other things, but serving was gone. And the longer serving was gone, the more people's faith went right with it. Because when people stop serving, then the need for Jesus in their life, you don't need it. And so that's why, if you ask a lot of Christians, that's why we see the numbers haven't returned. That's why we see people struggling with their faith. Why they're like, yeah, I don't feel like I love him as much as I used to love him. It's because until you go and do, you won't know him. It is go and do Christianity. We are commanded to go and do. Why is he so passionate about this? Why is this such a big deal? 3 things on your notes. First, God uses serving to change. I want you to, instead of us, write me. God uses serving to change me. That's why. And there's a lot of work to do here. So he's going to use serving to change me. That story of that blind 18-year-old girl who's been homeless and all this suffering, and she's full of joy. Why? Because she goes and does, right? She's living the go and do life. She's living it out. And here's why that matters. Look at this verse, Romans 12:11. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor. That's passion and energy. And how do you do it? Serving the Lord. If you stop serving, you stop becoming a go and do Christian, goodbye to your spiritual passion for God. You won't have it anymore. You don't need it anymore. It is directly tied to you learning to go and do. If you don't go and do, you will never experience that passion. Because that's what he uses in our lives to really change us. In my life, over and over again, some of the most significant moments in my life, turning points in my life have come because of serving. It's about 20 years ago, I was with friends in Minnesota and in the Twin Cities, and they said, hey, we want to take you over to this place called Feed My Starving Children. It's an organization headquartered in the Twin Cities. And they said, we're going to go and pack some meals for starving kids. And I'll be truthful with you. The first time they said this to me, I was on vacation. Vacation, do you think I wanted to go do that? Being really honest with you, I didn't think that sounded like a good use of my vacation time. Just being honest. But, how could I say no? So I said yes, and we went, and 25 cents. 25 cents is all it takes to get a meal to a child like this. 25 cents. And they send millions and millions of meals around the globe. That's the same child, by the way. Same child. Because of Feed My Starving Children meals. And then, of course, you put a hairnet on. Many of you participated in this before. You put a hairnet on, and you pack the meals that are going to be sent to these children to save them from starving to death around the globe. And it transformed me. My partnership with that organization, as a church, we still do things every year for Feed My Starving Children, raising money to save kids from starving to death around the world. My whole life changed because of it. Just so many stories I could tell you like this. God is interested in changing your character. You know why? You bring that with you to eternity. You will not bring your pocketbook. You won't bring everything you got stored in your attic, your basement, or that storage unit. But you bring your character with you, and our character is transformed when we're serving. That's why Jesus said, go and do. But that's not all. He said, go and do because God uses serving to change the world, which sounds like just big, fluffy language. Oh, there's Brian going, exaggerating the point, right? Like really change the world? Come on. Does he really use it to change the world? Well, let me show you this before. First thing I want to show you is this. Paul, again, in the book of Romans, you have to get to the answer in your own mind first. What do you think the character of our God is like? When he sees somebody who's off the path, doing things wrong, being destructive, what force do you think he wants to unleash in their life? Many Christians will tell you the wrong thing. They will tell you it's the wrath of God. They will tell you it's his anger. They will tell you all kinds of things about how mad he is and how much he wants to take them down. You know what Paul said is the force that God uses when he wants to change a human being's life? Romans 2:4 says, not realizing that it's God's kindness that is intended to lead us to repentance. When we're off the path, repentance is getting us back on the path, and the force he wants to use in our life is kindness. It's the force that he uses to change us, and it's the force he still uses in this world to change the world. And I remember, I'll never forget the day I learned it. Indonesia is the most densely populated Muslim nation on the planet. More Muslims per capita than anywhere on the planet. Indonesia. In 2003, a survey was done, and they said, how many of you have a favorable view of America? Well, Muslims, how many do you think they had a very favorable view of America in 2003? 15%. 15%. And then the next year, after that survey was taken, do you remember what happens? This devastating tsunami just obliterates entire sections of Indonesia. And we're all watching it on the news. And there are Red Cross drives and opportunities to help and serve, and millions and millions and millions of dollars comes from America as people just give and give and give and give, and the government sends all of this food and support over there, and people are just, and again, just because our hearts are broken, because even though we have religious differences, they are human beings and they're suffering, and we are called by Jesus to serve them regardless of what they believe about God and what they believe about us. Doesn't matter, they're still in need, and we're going to serve them. And then they did the survey 2 years later, 2003, that survey said 15%. Do you know what it was like after we served them for the next 2 years? 44%. It tripled. Because we preached at them, right? Because we really let them have it and we told them how wrong they were, right? That's the force that God used, really change them. No, the force that God uses to change the world when he wants to change the world is the force he uses when he wants to change a human life. It is kindness. It is kindness through our serving. That's what he uses to change us. And that's what he's going to use to change this world. And that's why we're giving away all these signs today, because it is one of the most spiritually profound messages that you could ever lock into your mind. It's the force he wants to use. He wants to use my kindness to change the people of this world. But that's not all. That's not the only reason why it's so important that we get involved in serving, why we take this value way up. It's that when we serve others, we are serving God. And this may be the most important thing I'm going to say to you today. It may be. When we serve God, we're serving others. At every funeral, I say one line. There's one line that I repeat, and I say to people, we get this confused all the time. We think that when someone has died, that they've gone from the land of the living into the land of the dead, and it's the exact opposite. The reality is we are all currently in the land of the dying. We are all dying. From the moment you were born, a clock started. And we are ticking down. This is the land of the dying. The land of real life is coming. That's real life. When we encounter him face to face, we will know love and joy and happiness like we have never dreamed. And Jesus said, here's what's going to happen. If you do that challenge earlier, you start reading the book of Matthew, you're going to read the story for yourself. But here's the story. Jesus said what's going to happen is that on the day that we die, we're going to stand in front of the King of Kings. He'll be on his throne, and we will stand in front of him. We will just be amazed at his beauty and his holiness, his perfection, and his love. We will feel loved completely for the first time in our existence. It'll be transformational in our lives. And then Jesus said, here's what's going to happen. The king is going to sit on his throne. He's going to look at you and he's going to say, oh my goodness, you know what? I was hungry and you fed me. And I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was naked and you clothed me. I was homeless, you took me in. I was in prison and you visited me. And we're going to say, when did we ever do that for you, king? And Jesus said, the king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And those last few words, that's what you need to lock in your mind. You want to know why serving is transformational for us? Is because every time you serve a human being, God himself takes it personally. Every act of service, even down to the level of just giving a cup of cold water to someone, that's what Jesus said. Even to that level of minutia, something we would just ignore and take for granted, he's not. He's keeping track of every single level of it. So for those of you who are just coming today, we just finished this big food drive. The stage used to be full, and this was just after a few weeks into the food drive. We asked people to help us restock a local area food pantry with all the basics that they were asking for. And this section was just huge, and they delivered all of it last week. And some of you went and bought food. Do you know what your future holds for you? Do you know that when your time on earth ends and you stand in front of the king will say, I was so hungry and I came in to get food and you had brought me food, thank you. And you're going to say to him, when did I ever give you food? And you say, remember when you did that food and you brought that in? What you did for them, you did for me. That's what he's going to say to you. And the king is going to say, welcome to your eternal reward, because it's rewarded for all time. It's rewarded for all time. For those of you who take meals after church on Sunday morning, if you're watching online, every week we have a cooler in the back, and there are a team of people that make meals here at the church. And every month, we have to keep making new meals because they all get handed out. You take a meal and you go and serve someone in kindness, in this simple act of kindness, do you know what Jesus is going to say to you someday? He's going to say, oh my goodness, thank you. I was really down. And you showed up, and that act of kindness meant so much. And you're going to say, when did I ever do that for you? And you say, you took that meal, and what you did for them, you did for me. That's what he's going to say. When we serve others, we are serving him. So it is imperative that we invest in the lives of others by serving. So 3 things this means. First, you got to let yourself see the needs around you. You have to let yourself see the needs around you. And this is painful. This is not fun to do. But it is really important. Let yourself see the needs. I remember years ago I was reading this book about this very issue. And he said, the problem is this. He said, the way a rich nation thinks about the poor will always be convoluted. By the way, you do know that we're a rich nation, right? I mean, I don't have to convince any of you. We are the wealthiest nation that has ever existed in the history of the planet. And I don't care what your situation is. 2/3 probably of the whole world would change places with you right now, regardless of what you have or don't have. Compared to how rich everybody else is, it doesn't matter. When you look at how poor everybody else is on the planet, they'd trade places with you right now. Because they'll never own a car, and they'll never have a stove, and they'll never have a fridge, and they'll never have food stored up for more than just the bare moment that they need it. That's the world. They never, ever, ever will need a treadmill. Ever. They will never have enough. And that's the world. And he said the way that we look at this is convoluted. He said the richer people become, the less naturally they stay in touch with the realities of life at the bottom. And the more they naturally prefer to be excited about their own prospects rather than concerned about the needs of the people around them. And that happens just so subtly. It becomes more and more about me and less about others, and then serving's gone. That's not Jesus. Let me go back to this verse I showed you earlier. Jesus saw, what did he do? Look at the word. He saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them, and he healed their sick. So I'm telling you, you have to get in places where you can see what's happening in our communities. So I'm telling you, don't view serving options like going to help at Feeding Friends as an optional thing if you have some spare time. Okay? Because go and see what actually is happening in our community. Don't view opportunities to go to New Beginnings on a Saturday morning as a great inconvenience for you. Buy some toys, clothes, whatever it is, and bring it there on a Saturday morning so you can see with your own eyes how great the need is. You got to let yourself see it. If you're watching online, I know these ministries I'm talking about are in our location. I promise you, people watching in Minnesota, Iowa, and out west, you have community needs right now. Go get involved and see for yourself, because you've got to let yourself see what is actually happening. You got to let that see so that, and here's the hard part, okay, ready? You got to let it hit your heart, and you got to let it bother you. That's what I'm really saying. You got to let it hit your heart so that it actually bothers you. Let me take you right back to that verse I just showed you. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and what happened to his heart? It became full of the love of God for these people. So you'll never get the second one without the first one. I bet if you and I were disciples and we were getting out of the boat, all of a sudden, there's a massive crowd. I know that what my thought would have been, oh, great, here we go again. More people. I've got stuff to get done. I've got things. And here's all these people, and they all want to get around Jesus. I want to hear from Jesus. And all of a sudden, I look at Jesus, and he's getting out of the boat, and he looks up, and I bet you could see it on his face, don't you think? I bet you could see the compassion that was in his heart on his face as he goes, oh, my goodness, look at all these people, and there's so many needs here. I bet you could see it. I bet you could hear it, right? Don't you think so? I bet all of his disciples are like, oh. I bet they could all see the compassion of Jesus in that moment. In other words, I'm saying it's okay that you get bothered by the brokenness of this world. Matter of fact, nothing will ever change till you do. As long as poverty is just this abstract thought, instead of picturing a child that is starving in poverty, you will never do anything. You got to let yourself see so that it hurts your heart. I'm telling you, it's okay that you're supposed to be bothered by the fact that children will starve to death in our world today. It's okay that you're bothered by the fact that there are kids right now living in abusive homes and they're terrified, and that's their reality today. That's okay that bothers you. That's okay. Do not try and numb this. Do not try and keep your spiritual life just, bleached down to this simple formula where you just go to church once in a while. That is not what he commanded us to be. We are to be go and do Christians, and you won't go and do till you see and let it hurt your heart. You will never go and do till it bothers you enough to get off the couch and go. So you got to see, and then you got to let it hurt your heart. And then you do what Jesus did. You just start serving. Because what happens in the verse? Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion. He saw it, it hurt him, and what does he do? He moves to action, right? He does something about it. He heals the sick. He becomes what he commands all of us to be, the go and do Christians. Here's what I sincerely believe, and I want you to write this down on your notes. Every follower of Jesus must have a serving outlet. You will never, ever, ever connect deeply with God and experience the power and joy and meaning in your life till you do. Ever. Until you do, then you will never experience the joy and meaning, purpose that he has for your life. Because you'll never be obeying the command of going and doing. And there are so many options for you. I mean, you can serve here. There are all kinds of serving opportunities here. We put sign-up sheets out. You can join us with all the things that we're doing, and keep in mind why they're so important. For some of you, just need to hang this up somewhere and review those three things, why it's so important that you keep serving. Or let me keep reminding you, because I'll keep doing it. You can get involved in a local food pantry. Do you know how many food pantries there are around us? Lots of little communities have them. Why don't you go volunteer? And don't volunteer one time because, Brian made you feel a little bad about this, and you're going to, no, sign up and get it on the calendar, and you're going to go every other Saturday morning, and you're going to go every other Wednesday night, whatever it is. You put a cadence to it so that it's constant, because you know what's going to see? You know what's going to happen is slowly you're going to see and see and see and see, and it's going to start to hurt your heart, and you're going to do and do and do, because that's how it works. Get involved in feeding friends on Wednesday night. There's a group right in our community that's been doing this for years, feeding hungry people in our community. We don't have to reinvent it. Go join them. Go join them every Wednesday night. I think that we should find a way as a church that this is one of our things ongoing, is that they can't keep up with staffing it and feeding it. It's over $500 every week for food to feed these hungry people. We're taking care of it one time. Maybe we should do more as a church. Maybe we should be more involved in that. Get involved in the Humane Society. Volunteer. Some of you, your biggest compassion areas towards animals that are neglected and abused, and how much joy they bring into people's lives. Go volunteer there. For some of you, it's their nursing home. How many of you are bothered by the fact that this is a fact? In our community, right now, there are people who haven't had one phone call or one visit for the last 3 weeks from anyone. You bothered by that? Nobody. Nobody comes. Nobody calls. They wake up in the morning knowing what their routine is going to be. It's going to be watch TV, eat some food, maybe talk to the staff, and go to bed and do it again tomorrow. You okay with that? You okay to live in a world where our seniors are treated this way? I mean, they're cared for, but is that really being cared for? I remember when we were young, as a church that I was a part of, we used to go and play checkers and talk to, because that's all they want. Somebody to show that they care. Doesn't take any money to start that one, does it? Just go on Saturday morning, spend a few hours talking to people, showing them that they still matter. Get involved in an area church that's doing something we're not doing, like feeding friends. A friend of mine in the church is involved in a youth ministry in the area. We don't have a youth ministry, so he goes and serves in a youth ministry in the church that does have one. Great! Go do that. If that's your passion area, then get involved in that. How many of you are bothered by the fact, have you heard the stats about what happened to these kids when COVID hit and they lost 2 years of education? Do you know what their future is now? Do you know how far behind they are in the 8 ball? I mean, they're in trouble. Can you read or write at a basic level? Can you tutor? Do you know how much the schools would love to have people that would say, I'll give 1 night a week. I will come and I will read with kids. I will come and I will do basic math with kids. You know, they're not asking you to do calculus because we'd be in trouble, right? But they can show that you care, and we can do some basic things, right? Pick something. That's my point. I don't care what. But you know, we have a church member that's heavily involved in the Cancer Coalition. Wonderful. Wonderful. Awesome. Go and do. I'm not saying it's difficult to really experience the love and joy and meaning and purpose that God has for you on this world without a serving focus. I'm telling you right now, it is impossible. You will never know the joy and meaning and purpose of God in this world until you get serious about Jesus' simple 3-word command and go and do. If you reduce Christianity to be go and sit and listen to Brian once in a while, you will never, ever know what Jesus has for you. And that would be tragic. Because we are in the land of the dying, headed rapidly toward the day we will stand in front of the King. And the King takes this so seriously that he records every single act of kindness you bring into this world. So a couple of questions as we finish up today. Are you a go and do Christian? Have you replaced the do with something else? What steps can you take this week to start serving in any area? It doesn't matter. And many of you are. Many of you are. You already have an area. You're already heavily involved. Wonderful. Listen, I'm telling you right now, for those of you who are already serving, you want me to tell you this? You will never, ever, for eternity, regret that decision, ever. You are making exactly the right decision. No matter how much money it costs you, how much time, how much difficulty it costs you, you will never regret that. Because you're going to spend eternity there. You're not spending eternity here. So who cares if it costs you some money and some time to gain what you can never lose? You're making exactly the right trade-off. Keep going. Some of you just needed to hear that. You who are serving so much, you are making exactly the right trade-off. And are you clear in your mind about why this is so important? Let me have you bow your heads as we finish. You know, that girl at the beginning discovered there is a world of difference between knowing about Jesus and knowing him. And I want you to think about that as we finish today. Where are you at spiritually with that question? Do you know a lot about Jesus? You got some information? One of the surest questions is to answer the follow-up and say, how much do you love him? Do you love him with your heart? You can't love a thing, but you can deeply love a person. And for some of you, that question's a little bit troubling because you don't feel any love for God. You got information about God, but that won't ever change your life. Not till you go from knowing about him to knowing him, and Jesus is the key. Jesus has opened the way. With his death on the cross, he paid in full for every unloving thing you and I have done in this world. Everything. He paid so that we could be forgiven and we could go from knowing about God to knowing him. And if that's what you want with your head bowed, you can just say something like this in your heart to him. Just say it between you and God. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. With the faith I have, I'm coming to you today. Would you please forgive me? I'm very, very imperfect. I don't want to know about you anymore. I want to know you. Come and make your home inside of me today. In Jesus' name, amen. Now, can I ask everyone to take this little card out of your program? I ask you to do this every week. That's okay. Just take a moment and do this. If you're a regular tender, just put your name down. But notice right here in the middle, see these boxes right here? Some of you may have just asked for his gift of forgiveness or renewed your commitment. Just check that box. Let us know what you've done, and we'll send you some follow-up material in the mail. If you have something you want us to pray about, put it down here. If you have a comment about today, you're welcome to write it on there, and then just drop it in one of the 2 offering boxes back on the back wall where you came in. On your way out, don't forget to take one of the signs as a reminder about what we talked about today. Remember what the force is that God wants to use in you to change this world, and some meals too. So thanks for coming. Hope to see you again next week, or Good Friday. Good Friday if you can make it.